All right, welcome to the Heights Buyer Blueprint. My name is Jordan Shoger. So I'm a licensed real estate agent here in Cleveland Heights, and I'm with Keller Williams Living, and I run Heights Real Estate Co. And so I appreciate everybody joining on live and also watching this after the fact as well. And so excited to get into it, and I think we will just kind of let it rip and start from the beginning here. Um, I want to quickly go over what this class is about and kind of what we're going to cover. And so we'll obviously start. I'll give you a quick intro as to who I am and kind of why I'm doing all this and what Heights Real Estate Co. is all about. And then this workshop specifically, we're going to start out with the home buying process. So we're kind of going to look at a broad view, start to finish, what it takes to purchase a home and the steps along the way to educate you on what that process looks like. And then we're going to dip into confidently buying in Cleveland Heights, in the Heights area. So as many of you may or may not know, this is a unique area, both from the people in the community that make up the neighborhoods, but also there's a wide range of neighborhoods and price points. There's a lot of older homes in the area, so there's a lot to consider and think about that is different here and unique in the Heights than other cities. And so we're going to give you all the confidence in the world to be able to go into a transaction and kind of know what to look for, and just have a better idea of what to expect. And then lastly, we're going to cover just common mistakes to avoid. And so I think this will be a really valuable section of the workshop, where I kind of just recap some things that I see from my buyers, on a monthly basis of what holds them back or what frustrates them throughout the process so that you guys aren't going through the same thing as you start your home buying journey. So, who's this workshop for? So this is really for a wide range of buyers and categories of people. And so, as a realtor, I fully acknowledge that, this is something that I do every day, helping buyers and sellers and, multiple transactions obviously throughout the year. And so I'm very familiar with the process, but I fully recognize that it's kind of foreign to a lot of other people, even if you've bought before, maybe it was 10, 15, even 4 years ago, right? Sometimes you when you're not doing it every day, you kind of go through it and then it's behind you. You don't even think about it. And so this workshop is for anyone from a first-time home buyer who's buying their very first property to maybe renters that are just kind of exploring the possibility of buying and what it might take. Upsizing. So maybe you bought your first home and you outgrew it, right? You had kids or you just need some more space, whatever it may be. And you're looking to kind of upgrade from where you are now. Or, on the flip side, you're downsizing. Maybe your kids are out of the house and you just need something a little bit smaller and more manageable. This could be a great workshop for you. And then just anyone who wants some more clarity and curiosity about the buying process. Like I said, this isn't something that people do a large number of times throughout their life. You may buy and sell a house, one or two homes, and that's it. So somebody that just wants some more clarity and refreshing on what the process is. Quick intro about me. So, like I said, my name is Jordan Shoger. I'm a licensed real estate agent with Keller Williams Living and primarily work here in the Cleveland Heights area, Cleveland Heights, University Heights, Shaker. I'm born and raised in Cleveland Heights. So I've got a lot of pride in this community and in the folks that make up the community and being able to help people buy and sell homes here as well. And so I currently live in Cleveland Heights with my wife and our two boys. And as I said, I'm a licensed realtor. I've been doing real estate, as of 2026. It's been almost 6 years now that I've had my license in practicing real estate. And one of the things that when I first was licensed that I was very naive to and kind of shocked me a little bit, I didn't really understand, like a lot of people going into a brand new profession, the true ins and outs of being an agent and kind of the perception that realtors got. But one thing that stuck out to me was the negative perception that came with being a realtor. I remember reading some stat about like the most untrustworthy professions, and it was like attorneys and then realtors. And I was like, what? I'm like, oh my gosh. I say, so I didn't want to be that type of realtor that people felt they couldn't trust, especially with such a big purchase, buying one of the biggest assets that you may ever buy in your life. And so I took a lot of pride from the beginning of doing things, with integrity and honesty, in operating that way and feeling that everything would work out if I did that. And so that kind of spun me into wanting to really focus on and seeing an opportunity to focus on a specific geographic location, which led me to, the areas that I know best, Cleveland Heights, University Heights, and Shaker, being from here, and living here majority of my life, going to Roxborough Elementary School, going to Roxborough Middle School, graduating from Cleveland Heights High. It made sense in my mind. I said, well, why wouldn't I work in this area? If I can choose where I'm kind of doing most of my business and where I'm marketing, like why not do it in the area I know and I love the best? And so, kind of long story short, that was the motivation behind starting Heights Real Estate Co. And so we are a hyper local residential real estate company that specializes in, a smaller geographic location, being Cleveland Heights. We feel that it's needed because it's a very unique area, like I mentioned. And so you really got to know the ins and outs of the neighborhoods and the markets to be able to properly help folks either buy or sell a home. So that is a little bit about me, and before I was in real estate, I was managing teams of people for Amazon. So coming from the big corporate environment. And then before that, I was in college coaching. So I coached college lacrosse. And so I've always had that mindset of coaching and educating and guiding people through the process. I'm not a big pushy salesperson, nor do I believe that you can do that with something like real estate, right? It's such a big asset and such a big decision that you really need somebody to coach, educate, and help guide you through the process, because there's a lot that goes into it. So that's a little bit about me. And like I said, we're excited to get these workshops rolling for everybody, and let's dive right into it. So looking at the buying process, this is kind of our first topic that we're going to cover. And, keep in mind that no one real estate transaction is the same. Okay. So it's something like 25 plus people are involved in one real estate transaction. So this includes buyers, sellers, their agents, title companies, home inspectors, lenders. So there's a ton of people that are involved, and everyone has to be doing their job and kind of staying on point throughout a transaction for things to go well, and just like anything, when you're dealing with people, sometimes that doesn't always happen. And so there are a lot of things that come up and happen throughout a transaction, but this is kind of the general idea and breakdown of how it all works. So we're going to start by talking about financial readiness, which is a big one, right? Just preparing yourself financially and making sure that you've got everything set up from your pre-approval to, possibly having enough for a down payment so that you are ready to buy a house when you find the right one. We're going to talk a little bit about the home search, and so how that process works, and hiring a great agent, and what all that looks like. And then, after you've searched a little bit, you're making an offers and something is accepted, we're going to talk through offers and negotiations, and also how to submit a strong offer. And on the selling side, like what is a seller and their agent evaluating when they are reviewing offers, especially in a competitive multiple offer situation. And we're going to talk about negotiations and those type of things as well. And then inspections and appraisals. And so these are two big hurdles that you need to cross throughout a real estate transaction. So we're going to talk about expectations for home inspections, especially here in the Heights, and then also appraisals, what they are, and kind of what if situations around those. And then lastly, closing. So like what needs to happen for you to get the key to your new house? How do we get there after we've kind of gone through all the previous four steps there? So let's start with financial readiness, which is a really big one, obviously. So we want to make sure that you are ready and able to purchase a home. Like as I mentioned, it's a big purchase and a big asset that you're going to be buying. And so for most people, that is going to start with the pre-approval process. Okay, so like most folks are going to get a loan. They're going to go to a lender or a bank, and they're going to apply for a mortgage on the property. So somebody's going to lend them money in order to buy a home. If you're paying cash for the house, that's great. That's going to simplify the process a little bit and take away one of the big contingencies. But most people, like I said, are probably going to get a mortgage. And so this is going to start with a pre-approval. And the best way I always explain this to folks is going to look at homes and especially writing an offer on a house without a pre-approval letter is like going to the grocery store without your wallet, right? Like you need it. You need to show sellers that you're able to pay for what it is that you're asking to buy. So I am not a lender and I'm not a financial advisor, but I can kind of give you the ins and outs of what this process looks like, and I certainly can give you resources to contact in order to get set up with the pre-approval process and going through there. But basically, a lender or a bank, they're gonna get some basic information from you. Okay, so they're gonna get personal info. They're gonna, run credit checks. They're gonna verify income. They're gonna look at your debt to income ratio. They're gonna look at previous or proof of employment. All these things. They're gonna try to paint a picture for how financially kind of stable and ready you are. And what they're going to be trying to do is determine how much money they are going to be willing to loan you. Okay. And so they're going to give you a pre-approval letter that says, hey, congratulations, you're pre-approved for a mortgage up to, we're going to lend you this amount of money. And so your home purchase based on your down payment as well, your purchase price can be up to this amount. All right. And again, if you've got extra questions about pre-approvals or you need a lender to reach out to, let me know and I can connect you with a few different resources. Next, so once you have that pre-approval letter, it's important to think about, affordability versus max pre-approval. So some people, they're going to get that pre-approval letter and they're going to be like, wow, like I can afford a, $800,000 house. Well, that's what they're saying that they're willing to lend you, or that's the loan amount that they're willing, but you need to factor in, just monthly expenses. So everything from grocery stores or daycare bills, gas, clothes, like all these little things, your mortgage or your rent is just part of what you're paying monthly for all these other things. And so it's important to factor that in. And like I said, talk with the lender, talk with the financial advisor to make sure that you're not, squeezing yourself too thin when it comes to the price of the home that you're buying. So I will say this, very few of my clients purchase a home for their max pre-approval. Okay. Um, Other things to consider. So, especially here in Cleveland Heights, Shaker Heights, we want to consider property taxes. And so, in the Heights, property taxes are a little bit higher than some surrounding cities. Okay. And so, it's important that your lender understands that. You're using a local lender that understands these neighborhoods, but also you're keeping an eye on it because usually, people factor in or they wrap that property tax payment into their monthly payment. And so, depending on where the property taxes are, it could really impact your monthly payment. So make sure you're thinking about that. And then insurance. And so we like personally just ran into this. We were switching home insurance providers on our own home here in Cleveland Heights, and we've got some older knob and tube wiring. And not every insurance company will insure knob and tube wiring. And so we were luckily able to get a really good deal, but it slims down your options possibly for who you're using as an insurance provider, which could raise the cost in some situations. So just something to think about. And then lastly, maintenance. It is very common to go into a 100-year-old home here in the Heights, which is going to require a different level of maintenance than maybe a house that's 10 years old. So just planning and thinking about those things, after you get your pre-approval of really honing in and deciding like, okay, we're pre-approved for X, but we're really more comfortable purchasing a home in this price bracket after considering all those things above. And then lastly is down payment. So question I get a lot is like, how much down payment do I need? Do I need 20%? And, no, you don't need 20%. And there's a lot of different, loan packages out there. There's everything from, government insured FHA loans that only require 3.5% down. There's VA loans if you're a veteran that are 100% financed. And so you don't need any money down. And then there's also just different packages, first-time homebuyer programs and packages that lenders do offer that don't always require 20% down. Now, some of it depends on the situation, right? If you're in a competitive home buying market where there's multiple offers, it may, benefit you to put some more money down or just show the seller that you are financially strong. But it doesn't always have to be like that. And there's a lot of different ways to make it happen. But the short answer is you don't always need 20%. Okay. But the down payment is something to think about as well as you're planning financially. All right. So that's financial readiness. Now we're going to get into the home search. So by this point in the process, you have your pre-approval, which is awesome. You've got basically your wallet is ready. You know what your budget is. You've kind of got an idea of the price of home that you're looking for. Kind of while all that is happening, and then after you get that pre-approval, because it's going to be one of the first things that your agent asks for, you want to link up with and hire an agent to help you out. And so, what's the role of the realtor? I mean, we've got a million different roles, everything from obviously real estate expert to psychologist to best friend, like you name it. Throughout the transaction, there's a lot that's going to be needed from an agent. And so you really want to make sure you're meeting with somebody that you trust, and that knows the area and knows the process, that you're looking in. So, the way that I look at what a realtor does is, we should really be guiding and educating you. Like again, I'm personally not a salesy person. I don't like people trying to push and sell things on me. And I don't believe that buying a home is a process that you can really push somebody towards, right? Either they're ready or not. And usually what they need is they need great guidance, they need great expertise, and they need great advice to be able to make it happen and confidence, because this is a really big purchase and most people aren't super familiar with the process. So that's kind of how I approach it, is being more of a guide and an educator and a coach, to get you through the process. Okay. So that first meeting, if you're meeting with me as an agent, some things that we're going to go over. We're going to go over two required forms, which I'll talk about briefly. We're going to kind of have a different separate workshop on exactly what these are, but two forms are going to need to be signed prior to us seeing a home. So the first one is going to be a buyer rep agreement, which is relatively new in the last couple of years, but it's basically an agreement with a specified amount of time attached to it that says, hey, Jordan or whoever the realtor is going to represent us as a buyer's agent and perform these tasks. And he will be paid X amount of commission in the event that the seller is not covering that commission for the buyer's agent. He's going to follow fair housing laws. He's going to do all these things for us. So it's basically an agreement that outlines the services that I'll provide, and for a time frame as well. And then the second form that you'll be required to sign is a consumer guide to agency. So this is not necessarily a binding document, but it's required to be signed before you see homes. And it just outlines the services that myself and my brokerage provide to both buyers and sellers. Okay. And it emphasizes, that we follow all fair housing laws and all those type of things as well. So it's really just an information sheet that tells you how we operate as a brokerage and as agents. So once those two things are signed, and once you show me that you have your pre-approval letter, we're ready to rock and we can go start to see homes. And the reason why, I mean, the buyer agreement and the consumer guide are required. I could lose a license by not having you sign those. But the pre-approval, like I said, it just shows that you're ready, and you're not missing out on a house. If you're going to see homes without it, you're ready to go and you can make an offer if you find the right one. So that's the first thing we'll talk about. And then, we'll get into search criteria. So this is kind of starting to be the fun part of finding a house. We're going to talk through what type of home are you looking for? What neighborhood are you looking for? The price range, obviously, how many beds, how many baths, what are the absolute must-haves? You have to have it. I was talking with a client the other day and he's like, look, I have to have AC. He goes, don't even send me houses that don't have AC, or we've got to have a backyard or a attached garage, whatever it may be. So we'll get into kind of some of the search criteria. I do like to leave it somewhat broad and open. We like your must-haves and must-not-haves are super important to have in there, but you'll notice that once you're out there starting to see homes, things might change. And something that you thought was super important to you initially may not be as important as you get out there and start seeing homes. And so keep an open mind, and we'll kind of keep the search open while focusing on those non-negotiables that you give me. So, and then once we have the criteria set, we're ready to get out into the neighborhood. Okay. And so we want to start showings after that, which is the fun part. So getting out there, seeing homes in person, and really figuring out which ones you like best. And so I always encourage people, especially if you're a first-time home buyer, is like, we don't want to be seeing 100 homes, but get out there and see a few homes to really start to understand the neighborhood, especially, like I said, if you're buying a house for the first time, and get a feel for what all these homes look like. All right. And then, the next step in the process is, you've seen some homes, you haven't liked some, you've liked some, you're finally ready to put an offer together um, on a home that you like, which is great. Okay. Now, there's a lot that goes into an offer, and there's a lot to kind of consider, and there's a few things that a seller and their agent are going to evaluate as important items when it comes to a buyer's offer. So, first, the components of an offer. So you've got price, terms, and conditions are kind of the meat and potatoes of an offer. So your price is obviously what the purchase price is. What are you offering for the home? Okay. And then, kind of below that price and kind of wrapped into that number is going to be your earnest money deposit. So an earnest money is also known as a good faith deposit. So this is money that is put and held in escrow usually by the title company within 4 days of a signed agreement. And this is basically just showing the seller that, hey, we're serious about this house. Here's kind of some skin in the game, and this money's gonna be held by the title company. Now that money it goes towards your overall down payment. So if you're putting 20% down, that earnest money is part of that 20%. It's just deposited much earlier in the process. Then the rest of that down payment is deposited at closing or wired at closing. So that's what price is, right? It's your purchase price, how much you're offering for earnest money, and then also your down payment. And so that's going to be the first thing, the first section that a seller is going to look at. Your terms, okay? So terms of the contract are going to be things like your closing date, your financing. So are you getting a loan? Is this a cash deal? Is it an FHA loan? Is it a conventional loan? Is it a VA loan? Those are going to be your kind of financing terms there. And then any, maybe exclusions, things that are included in the house, not included in the house. That's going to be the kind of the bulk of your terms of your offer. And then lastly is conditions. And so like, this is contingencies and conditions. Like what else are we going to have to get through in order for this deal to go through? So this is everything from inspections to appraisals, or and if there's any sort of appraisal gaps, which we'll get into here in a little bit later in the workshop. Um, Point of sale is a big one here in Cleveland Heights, in University Heights and Shaker. And so are there any outstanding point of sale violations on the house? And is the buyer going to assume those? Is the seller going to assume those? And so all of these things are going to be kind of wrapped up into the conditions aspect of your offer. Okay, so that's how it's broken down. Price, terms, and conditions are the things that we're going to be focusing on with this offer. Now, what are important variables outside of purchase price? Got everything we just talked about. And I always tell buyers that as a seller's agent, if I'm advising a seller, I'm gonna, especially for a multiple offer situation, I'm always gonna encourage them to take the offer that has the best price, terms, and conditions, but also has the highest probability of closing. Because, you're not hiring me, and a seller isn't hiring a listing agent just to get their home under contract, right? Once we're under contract, that's when the work begins. Okay, so that's when timelines are starting to tick, and we've got to get through all these contingencies. And so the least amount of kind of humps that we need to jump over, or contingencies that we have, or what ifs about a buyer, that we can eliminate. Usually that's the safer offer to go with, or that's the one that we advise. So the one with the best price, terms, conditions, and also has the highest probability of closing. So. There's a lot that goes into it, but that's kind of the overview of offers and negotiations. The biggest thing is it also depends on, it's a situational basis. So anytime that a buyer wants to make an offer on the house, the first thing I do is I get on the phone with the listing agent. I say, introduce myself, obviously. If I don't know them already, I ask them what type of interest they've had of the house. Do they have any offers already in hand? Because, how competitive the situation is may impact our decision, how much we're going to offer and all those type of things. And so that's an important step to consider as well. But that's the basics of offers and negotiations. So let's say after you submit an offer, you get your offer accepted, which is outstanding, right? Everyone's pumped up, everyone's excited. You just bought a house, is what it feels like. But in actuality, as soon as the offer is accepted, like I said before, that's when all the work begins. Okay, especially on the agent side. So that's when, we're getting through inspections, we're getting through appraisals, we're trying to make sure that the loan is getting processed on time. We're making sure that those 25 plus people in the transaction are doing what they're supposed to be doing and they're doing it on time. Okay. And through most deals, the two biggest hurdles and kind of contingencies that we need to get through are inspections and appraisals. Okay. So let's start with appraisals. So what is an appraisal? Appraisal is an opinion of value. And if you're getting a mortgage or getting a loan on the property, your lender, and this is something you'll pay for as a buyer, but is going to send out an appraiser to evaluate the home. Okay. And then the appraiser, before they get there in person, they're going to pull, a CMA or competitive market analysis, basically. And they're going to look at homes, preferably within a quarter mile or a half mile from your house that are similar beds, baths, square footage, finishes and those type of things to try to get an idea for the price that you are offering on the house that has been accepted for. Does the lender or does the bank feel that the home is worth that much? So this appraiser is going to give them a whole report that compares similar properties that have already closed, and they can see what the value of those homes are. They're going to compare it to yours to make sure that they're comfortable with their investing and they're comfortable lending you the amount of money that they said they will. So that's kind of the basics of what an appraisal is. Now, a few things can happen. When the appraiser goes out, they can go out and say, "Hey, yeah, no problem. The house you guys are offering 350 for the house, and it's worth 350." Or they come back and they say that it's worth slightly more, maybe than you're paying for it. There's no problems there either. It essentially means you're getting a great deal for it. Now, where the issues sometimes present themselves could be if that appraisal comes back lower, so that opinion of value comes back lower than the price that you're under contract for, or that you're purchasing the property for. Okay, so let's say, hey, we're purchasing it for 350, but the appraiser's telling me it's only worth 330. So there's a gap there, right? There's a gap in the appraised value and the purchase price value. So a few things need to happen. Either the deal falls apart and we can't move forward, or the seller needs to come down in purchase price to meet that appraised value, or the buyer needs to bring additional cash to the closing table in order to fill that gap between the appraised value and the purchase price value. Um, that is in an offer where, it's kind of left up to negotiation, and all that's written in there says, hey, we need to get through the appraisal process, basically. Now, in some situations, mainly in hyper competitive situations where there's multiple offers on one property, a buyer may be willing to write an appraisal gap into their offer. So they say, hey, in the event that this house doesn't appraise, we're willing to cover in a gap up to X amount, or we're willing to cover a full gap. So those are things that can be put into your offer that, do give the seller confidence. But you just need to be careful that it's something you're comfortable with. And another role of the agent, or at least what I do, is I'll send a whole market analysis to you before we figure out what purchase price you're going to be at. Um, so that you don't feel like you're overpaying or you're buying the most expensive house in the neighborhood, or at least if you are, you know about it beforehand. So that's the appraisal and kind of the appraisal process in one hurdle that we need to get through. And then next is inspections. And so 100% of the time, I'm always, always, always going to recommend a buyer gets their own home inspection done. So a home inspection is done by a third party home inspector. We give a list of recommendations, and it's got to be a licensed home inspector. You're open to use whoever you want. But this is going to be a third party that you're going to pay as the buyer. So it's usually, anywhere from the $300 to $600 to get a home inspection done. Just kind of depends on who you use and if they're doing any additional, sewer scope inspections or radon inspections, or things like that. But that's kind of what to expect from a price standpoint. And these home inspections usually take anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. And so a home inspector can go through the entire house, top to bottom. They're going to test water. They're going to test the heating, cooling if they can. They're going to make sure that everything is operating correctly. And they're going to look at the integrity and the structure of the home. And so they're going to do their best to paint a picture and tell a story of the entire house. and that's going to come out in a very, very long report. So no matter the age of the home, you're going to get a lengthy inspection report that could be anywhere from 30 to 60 plus pages, right? Of just information about the house. Not necessarily any of it is bad, and there's no perfect home out there. Every home, even new builds, have little things that are quote unquote wrong with it. Okay. Um, but just know that you're going to get a big report. So don't worry or think anything is dramatically wrong with your house if you get a report that is 50 plus pages long. All right. What we really want to focus on after those reports are usually the summary page. So you're gonna have this lengthy report, and your home inspector is going to include in a summary page. It's really going to highlight any major issues. So this is health, safety, or structural issues that they found could be wrong with the home. Okay, so that's really what we want to focus on. And if we are going to do any negotiating after inspections, it's usually in one of those categories, either health, safety, or structural. All right. And that's where a great agent comes in hand. Kind of that we should help you break down this massive report that you got. And so I will be there on the home inspection with you. We'll be walking through with the home inspector as they gather all their information. They'll send you a report usually later that evening or first thing in the morning, and then we'll review it together as a team to make sure that we're highlighting all the important aspects of it, and we're not missing anything that may be worth negotiating. All right. Now, common inspection issues in Cleveland Heights. Let's dive into what that looks like. So, obviously, it's very common to come across a 100-year-old home here in Cleveland Heights, and so there are things that you may find in a home inspection on an older home that you may not find in a newer build. So, sticking to the health, safety, and structural items that I just talked about, let's look at health. And so some common things that may come up in these inspections are things like mold and mildew. So I see it a lot, obviously, in basements. If the basement is letting in water or it's moist down there for whatever reason, you can get some mold and mildew there. Or up in the attic, I see it frequently. So maybe there's a small roof leak, which is a big issue in itself, that's creating, condensation and moisture up in the attic. Or more often than not, if there's mold or mildew in the attic, we see it from improper ventilation of bathroom fans. So maybe the bathroom fan is just venting directly into the attic and it's not venting outside. That could cause some mold and mildew. Pest issues. So maybe there's mice or some sort of rodents that they found evidence of, lead paint, asbestos, some of those things that may be present in an older home. The home inspector, if they suspect it, they may note in the inspection and say, hey, I recommend a mold professional come out and evaluate this. This could be mold, or a pest inspector to look at this because this could be something more serious than just a couple little mice. So that's from the health side. Safety is, usually centered around electrical, plumbing, HVAC. Obviously you'll have your, safety issues with things like, missing steps or things like that. But the big ones are usually electrical, from that standpoint. What type of electric is in the house? Is it knob and tube wiring, older knob and tube wiring, which, if it's not in good shape, could be a fire hazard? Is there an outdated electrical box? That is in the house that needs to be replaced because it's a safety issue. Are there double tapped wires? And so you'll see in this first example here, this is one that I see frequently. So basically, too many wires are going into one breaker, and it's just could overload and cause a fire issue, or safety issue. So that's some of the electrical that could happen. Plumbing issues that we see a lot are, kind of centered around, if they're testing water and they see evidence of leaks, either current or previous leaks. But we really want to evaluate on these older houses the type of plumbing that is present. So is it old galvanized steel pipes, or is it copper pipes, which is better than the galvanized steel, or has it been updated with PVC or PEX? And so really kind of getting an idea of what those systems look like is super important. HVAC, so I saw this recently, so I threw it in there. Issues with backdrafting on your like hot water tank or your furnace, which could lead to carbon monoxide issues. And so those are some safety things that we see pop up on the inspection report that could be very well worth negotiating after an inspection. And then lastly, structural. And so this is a big one too, obviously, foundation. So looking at the foundation both outside and then down to the basement to make sure that there's no evidence of major cracks and make sure we don't need a engineer to come out and look at it. Your roof, floors, water intrusion. So like you want to know the age of the roof on these older homes. Is it newer? Is it, what type of roof is it? Is it a slate roof? Is it just an asphalt roof? So getting as much information about that as you can, making sure the floors are intact and not sloped too bad or those type of things. And then water intrusion is obviously huge in these older homes. Is the basement dry, right? And if it's not, obviously, has it been waterproofed or have they had any issues with it? And so that kind of falls into the structural bucket as well. So 99% of the time when we're negotiating things after an inspection, it's one of these three categories that those items are coming up in. But the biggest thing is making sure that you're hiring a trustworthy home inspector that understands these homes. All right. So and I know that was quick, right? We've gotten through that. And again, this is kind of a broad overview, and there's all sorts of what ifs that can happen throughout a transaction. But let's say we're through inspections, we're through the appraisal, we've got no issues there. It's time to move towards closing, which is the most fun part. I've got clients that literally we're done with the inspection. They're like, all right, like when do I get my keys? And I'm like, hold on. So here's the steps that take place after inspections, appraisals that are going to get us to the finish line and get you your keys. So the first one is final walkthroughs. Okay, so this is done usually a couple days before you sign your closing documents, which could be a few days before our closing date. And it's a chance for you to walk back through the house because the last time you were probably in the house was during the inspection. And it might have been fully furnished still, or repairs may need to have been done. So the final walkthrough is your chance to go through the house one last time before you take ownership to make sure that there's nothing damaged. Like I said, if repairs needed fixed or completed, make sure those are done and everything looks good there. And then after that final walkthrough, you're going to schedule your signing appointments with the title company. So the title company I mentioned before is a third party that takes care of holding and distributing funds, but also recording the deed to the house. And so that you are, recording it with the county so that you are officially transferring over as owner. And so and they'll do title searches to make sure that you're not, acquiring a home that has a bunch of financial liens on it and things like that. So title companies are super important to use as well. But you're going to schedule an appointment with them where you sit down with the notary and you sign all the closing documents that will officially transfer title to your name. So that can be done with the title company in their offices. They can meet you at your house. They can meet you at a Starbucks. I've had people do it all over the place. And so that's the next step after your final walkthrough. And then you're going to wire your funds. Okay. So your down payment, your closing costs, all those things are going to get wired to the title company. So you will never wire me personally money. You're not going to send the seller money. And so if an agent is telling you that you need to send them money, it's probably not correct. And so the title company is going to be the one that not only holds that money, but they're going to send you the wiring instructions. So make sure that any instructions about wiring money is coming from the title company and a legitimate contact at the title company. Okay. And so once the closing documents are signed, the lender has given the clear to close. Your loan has been approved, which is obviously super important. And then the title company receives your down payment and closing costs, and then also the remaining funds, that big loan that the lender is giving. Once they have all those funds in hand and everyone is signed, they will send out communication, usually to me, the agent, saying, congratulations, we closed. Then I'm able to give you the call and the great news that you're officially the new owner of the house. And so I'll either meet you at the house and give you the keys or give you lockbox access. But that's kind of the basic process of closing after we're done with our final walkthrough. All right. So hopefully everyone's still with me and not confused at this point, but let's get into confidently buying in Cleveland Heights and in the Heights in general. Okay. And so as I mentioned before, this is a super unique and diverse area, both from the community members that make up the neighborhoods, but also from a price perspective. There's a lot of different price points and homes in different neighborhoods and those type of things. So it's important to to kind of understand what all that looks like. In the to gain confidence, the best thing you can do is just get information about the local market. So this is a quick market recap from 2025. And so you can kind of see Cleveland Heights, University Heights, and Shaker, the number of sales that happened last year, how many days on market, that's what DOM is, that those homes spent, and then also what the average sale price was. Okay, so Cleveland Heights there, obviously the most homes out of the three cities sold in Cleveland Heights, a little bigger footprint than the other two. Least amount of homes sold in University Heights just because it's not as big of a city. That's why, University Heights, Cleveland Heights is one school district as well. So you can see from a sale price perspective. So this is average sale price. Cleveland Heights is lowest at 267. And I think that is, Cleveland Heights is going to have the biggest range. I mean, Shaker does as well, but you get homes that are $110,000 all the way up to over $1 million. So there's a really big range for sale prices. University Heights, it starts to come up a little bit. 297 was the average sale price last year, and then Shaker the highest at 410. Now Shaker it has plenty of homes in the 250, $300,000 range, but I'd say they have the most homes out of these three that are kind of north of six, $700,000. So not all of them are like that, but they have the most of them out of the three, I would say. So that kind of hikes up that average sale price a little bit. Now, what can you expect? How far does your money go? And these things are always changing. Like this is 2025 data, and on average, we're going to see appreciation year over year and for homes, which is a good thing. But this will kind of start to paint a picture of what you can expect. So let's say you're looking in the $250,000 range to buy a house. Here's what you can kind of expect to see in each city. So Cleveland Heights, this one sold last year on Orman, which is a great house, close to the Cleveland Heights Library, walking distance to restaurants, playgrounds, those type of things. So nice area where a lot of families live. This is 3 bed, 1.5 bath, just under 1,700 square feet. This is one that had a new roof on it. They had some updates done in the kitchen and the bath. Nothing, nothing out of this world from a kind of a quality standpoint, but nice updated things that you wouldn't have to do anything to. You could move right in and be ready. And they also had a third floor finished space as well. University Heights. So this is one that's sold on Meadowbrook, which is a little bit of a busier street, which could lower the price a little bit. It's kind of a cut-through street in some sections, but 3 bed, 1.5 bath, just under 1,600 square feet. This was one that somebody bought and flipped. So they bought it, did some work to it, obviously, and then they're flipping it for a profit. But newer windows, some cosmetic updates throughout, newer roof as well. And then Shaker 250, this is on Daleford. So again, nice neighborhood. This Daleford and some sections of it will have a lot of rentals, so that could bring down the price a little bit, depending on who the buyer is and what they prefer. But this is a 4 bed, 2.5 bath, just under 1,900 square feet, so a little bit bigger, but newer kitchen updates done to it. Partly finished basement, which is nice. Beautiful hardwood floors throughout. And so the price, the difference in price is going to have a lot to do with location. So what neighborhood, even within these different cities, and then obviously the condition of the property. Okay. Now, if you're looking slightly higher, $100,000 up, so 350, what is that going to buy you in these neighborhoods? So if we look at Cleveland Heights, this one sold last year on Shaker, and again, a very nice neighborhood with a lot of families and young professionals. Shaker Road, you can walk to Shaker Lakes. There's multiple schools you can walk to, playgrounds, on the rise bakery. So there's a lot of things, yoga studio right over there. A lot of areas you can get to just by walking if you live on Shaker. But this is a 4 bed, 2 bath. Had a newer roof on it, newer windows. They did just waterproof the basement, which is a huge plus on these older homes, and some kitchen updates as well. So you can kind of see the size start to go up a little bit on these 350 price points. And then the next one in University Heights, this is on Eaton. So it's really not far actually from Shaker. It's about quarter mile, half mile down the road. 4 bed, 2.5 bath, had a younger roof on it. This one didn't have any AC, so that could be, factor into the price a little bit. 2,200 square feet. They had a third floor finished area, Beautiful hardwood floors throughout as well. And then we look at Shaker. What does 350 get you in Shaker? So this is on Townley. This one sat on the market surprisingly for a little while, and they had to make some price reductions to it. But four bed, three and a half bath, just under 1,800 square feet. So a good size home, hardwood floors, point of sale compliant. There was a boiler system in there. I believe this one they might have had dual zone or kind of a forced air up top, I think, and a boiler. I can't remember exactly, but updated wiring, which is a huge plus on this one too. So this is kind of what you can expect in that $350,000 range for each city. And then as we creep up in price, and so we get above 525. So in Cleveland Heights, this was a completely remodeled home on Corridon, so a really really beautiful neighborhood over there, but a much larger home, brand new roof. They waterproofed the basement, new windows, kitchen updates. So that was a really really great space there. That one sold for 550 last year. University Heights, so you're not going to see prices really go much higher than 525. So there weren't any 550 sales. So I think 525 was one of the highest last year that sold in University Heights. And so really anything above 450 is going to be one of the higher price homes in all of University Heights. But this was a six bed, four and a half bath, almost 3,000 square foot house. So big house, great kitchen updates. They had a new HVAC system, updated bathrooms, finished basement. So a lot of really nice things, and the size and the location was great on this one. So that's where you hit that 525 mark. And then in Shaker, like I said, in Shaker, I'd say out of the three cities, you're going to find the biggest, the most homes north of $500,000. You can find them in every city, but they'll probably have the most in Shaker. So this one sold last year, four bed, two full bath, two half bath, just under 2,000 square feet. Beautiful hardwood floors. They had a really great yard patio set up on this one. Cool Tudor style home, finished third floor, updated kitchen. So this kind of starts to paint a picture and give you an idea of what you might be able to expect at different price points for each city. So hopefully those things, and again, in terms of confidence as a buyer, a lot of that will come through having a great agent that really understands these neighborhoods, in the ins and outs. I went through quickly kind of, what to expect in details about the city, but no matter what city you're buying in, you want to make sure that your agent has a good grasp on it because they're gonna know little nuances and ins and outs, which will be helpful obviously when you're searching, but it'll be super helpful if you run into any issues throughout a transaction. What if you run into point of sale issues in Cleveland Heights and your agent isn't familiar with what point of sale is and how to navigate it, and what can be done to get the deal closed, and put you in the best position as a buyer? So really important that your agent knows the area and you're leaning on them for help to give you that confidence. Now, this is a big one here. So common mistakes to avoid. There's a lot that goes on in a transaction, and the worst thing you can do is not feel confident going into it or not understanding the process, and you make a silly mistake, okay, that you feel bad about after you close or a year down the road or whatever it may be. So some things that I always recommend buyers think about is prioritizing, or this is something to avoid, is prioritizing cosmetic updates over system updates. So again, these are older homes, right? And someone could very well go into a house and just kind of cover it up with a brand new, kitchen cabinets and countertops or a brand new bathroom, and everything appears on the outside to be in great working order. When in reality, it's got a really old roof, or it's got super old windows, the HVAC is really old, or the basement's letting in water, those type of things. And so I always caution buyers to take a minute and look past the cosmetic things, and especially on these older houses, like let's look at the details. Let's look at the systems. How old is the plumbing, and what type of plumbing is it? How old is the electrical box? Because these are big ticket items that if they need replaced down the road, could be a lot of money. So I really want to make sure that you're acknowledging that during your first kind of walkthrough, and that's in your mind if you do decide to make an offer on it. Okay. And then next is emotionally overpaying. Now, I fully get that residential real estate is an emotional process, right? We got a lot of buyers that are moving into homes with their families. And it's very emotional. They want certain schools and they want certain living situations for them and their family. And it can get really emotional, especially if you miss out on a home, you make multiple offers and you don't get them, and you kind of just feel like everything's against you and it's not going to work. And then when you do find one, you're willing to do anything and everything it takes just to secure the home. We saw this a lot during COVID, 2020, 2021, where it was so competitive. Buyers were just doing anything and everything they could to secure a home. And then they kind of regretted it down the way. And so you really want to have a level head and again, lean on your agent, evaluate the local market, evaluate the home for what it's worth compared to other similar ones in the area, and make sure that you're confident and you feel good about the price that you pay for it or the terms and conditions that you put into it, and just trust that the right one will come around. Because you'd hate to get a year down the road or even less and you regret making the purchase that you made. Okay, so it's really important that you stay level-headed and you think about those things. And also, we see it right now with sellers who bought their home during COVID and they essentially overpaid for them. They're having a tough time selling it for a number that is going to get them out of it without bringing money to the table. So something to think about as well. And then the next is something to avoid is hiring the wrong home inspector. So you really want to make sure on these older houses that you're hiring somebody that's familiar with an older home, a home that is 100 plus years old. If you've got a home inspector that primarily does new builds, right, and they haven't been in a century home before, they may not be able to give you the same level of expertise as somebody that has, or guide you in the right way. Or, they don't, maybe they alarm you about something that maybe isn't as big of an issue as you think. So making sure you're hiring the right home inspector. And then lastly, as a buyer, is staying ready. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Okay. So what I mean by this is, I've got so many buyers that will call me and say, oh my, like, can we go see this house? Our dream house just hit the market. Like, we need to go see it today. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. Like, send over your pre-approval, and when are you ready to move? And like all these kind of qualifying questions for them. They're like, what do you mean pre-approval? We're not pre-approved, or our pre-approval expired, 3 months ago. And so just making sure that you've got everything in line, everything from your pre-approval, the being ready financially, as we talked about at the beginning of the workshop, having an idea for what type of home you're looking for so that when something comes up, you've got the ability to make a move on it. Because we are still in a competitive market. I had buyers last week writing offers and missing out on multiple offer situations. And so the best thing you can do as a buyer is make sure you're ready. So when that perfect house comes up or one comes up that you want to make an offer on, you want to go see, you're ready to do so. All right. So those are just a few kind of mistakes and things to avoid as a buyer to set you up and put you in the best place possible.